The movie begins in Scotland. Two American tourists step into a quiet local pub, where they pause to examine the famous photograph of the Loch Ness Monster. An elderly man nearby dismisses the image as a hoax, insisting there's a much deeper truth behind the legend. Intrigued, the couple joins him at his table as he begins his story. The tale shifts back to 1942, during World War II. A young boy named Angus McMorrow stands gazing across the dark waters of Loch Ness. He imagines wading into the lake, but his daydreams quickly turn terrifying as visions of drowning overtake him. In reality, Angus avoids the water entirely, instead collecting shells along the shoreline. His thoughts often drift to his father, a sailor in the Royal Navy, who once told him the loch was a mysterious, enchanted place beneath the surface. One day, Angus discovers a large, unusual egg buried in the sand and decides to take it home. He's soon found by his mother, who calls him back to their manor overlooking the loch. Once inside, Angus rushes to hide the strange egg in his father's old garden shed. His sister, Kirsty, arrives soon after, casually asking if Angus enjoyed his time by the shore, while quietly notes that he hasn't seemed happy in a long time. Alone in the shed, Angus marks off another day without his father, removing a stone from a bucket he uses to count the passing days. He begins washing what he believes is a rock, only to uncover a glowing blue surface beneath the dirt. As he hurries off to dinner, the egg suddenly begins to move. That night, a strange noise wakes Angus. Peering through his window, he notices the shed door standing open. When he goes to investigate, he discovers the egg has hatched. A mysterious creature darts around the shadows, frightened and hiding. Eventually, it reveals itself, an odd, alien-like being. Angus gently offers it a potato, slowly gaining its trust. Seeing that the creature is injured, he carefully bandages it, promising to care for it while keeping its existence a secret. The following morning, Angus awakens to the sound of military vehicles rolling in. Believing his father has returned, Angus and Kirsty rush outside, only to learn from Captain Thomas Hamilton that the manor is being taken over by the Royal Air Force for a military operation. As soldiers begin setting up camp, Hamilton explains they are preparing for the possibility of a German invasion. Realizing the danger these armed men pose to his secret companion, Angus rushes back to the shed and finds it completely torn apart. The creature has been desperately searching for food. Determined to protect both his new friend and his father's belongings, Angus tries to get food from the army kitchen, but the cook, Sergeant Strunk, refuses. Thinking quickly, Angus drags a garbage bin back to the shed, where the creature eagerly devours everything inside. Angus names the creature Crusoe, inspired by Robinson Crusoe. While Crusoe eats, Angus searches books to identify what kind of animal it might be, but nothing fits. He recalls his father's stories about a mythical monster said to live in the loch, a creature his father always dreamed of seeing. Noticing that Crusoe's skin is drying out, Angus pours water into a container to help him survive. Elsewhere on the loch, fishermen haul in their catch and observe soldiers installing artillery on a nearby hill. Captain Hamilton explains that German U-boats have been spotted in surrounding waters, and the troops are there to defend against them. While wandering the grounds, Angus spots Sergeant Walker carrying a dead deer, reinforcing his fear of what the soldiers might do if they discover Crusoe. Later, Anne enters the shed and is shocked by the mess inside. As she reflects briefly on her missing husband, she's interrupted by the arrival of Lewis Mowbray, the handyman she hired earlier. Suspecting that Angus may be hiding a pet, something strictly forbidden, and asks Lewis to deal with the situation. Moments later, Angus steps outside just as Lewis begins emptying the garbage bin. To Angus's shock, Crusoe is nowhere to be found. Desperate to protect his father's workshop while his father is away at war, Angus gets into a heated struggle with Lewis. Lewis argues that the workshop is no longer sacred. It's his responsibility now, and he can do whatever he sees fit. That night, Angus roams the estate calling out for Crusoe, unaware that Lewis has noticed his strange behavior. Inside the manor, Crusoe, now growing at an alarming rate, wanders through the house and accidentally encounters Churchill, the military dog. Churchill immediately gives chase. Crusoe barely escapes, and when damage is discovered, the housekeeping staff place the blame on the soldiers and their dog. Just as Angus is about to give up his search, Kirsty suddenly screams in terror. Angus rushes to her room and discovers Crusoe hiding in her bathtub, surrounded by water. He reassures Kirsty that the creature is harmless and convinces her to keep the secret from their mother. Though frightened, she reluctantly agrees. Later, and asks Lewis to inspect the guest bathroom and offers him a change of clothes that once belonged to her husband. Lewis politely refuses, asking whether he will really need them when he returns, and quietly reveals the painful truth. Her husband's ship was sunk over a year ago, and he has been presumed missing ever since. She explains that Angus still struggles to accept the possibility of his father's death. Meanwhile, Angus and Kirsty try everything they can to keep Crusoe quiet, but the creature continues to grow, making secrecy increasingly difficult. When Lewis arrives to repair the bathroom, Kirsty, against Angus's wishes, lets him inside. Almost immediately, Lewis sees Crusoe and begins to suspect that the creature is a water horse, a being from Celtic legend. According to the myth, only one water horse exists at a time. When it grows old, it lays an egg and dies, passing its life on to the next. As searches the house for the children, Angus begs Lewis for help. Lewis and Kirsty manage to distract and, claiming they were assisting with repairs. Although Anne remains suspicious and insists on checking the bathroom herself, she finds it empty. Crusoe has vanished. Unbeknownst to her, Lewis has hidden the water horse inside the toilet, successfully deceiving her. Relieved, Anne leaves the bathroom. On her way downstairs, Anne runs into Captain Hamilton, who invites her to a dinner he's hosting as a gesture of thanks. She happily accepts. Later, Lewis advises Angus that Crusoe belongs in the loch. It's the only place where he'll truly be safe. Angus, however, refuses to let him go, convinced that Crusoe's rightful place is with him. On the night of the dinner, Anne searches her wardrobe and selects an elegant dress she hasn't worn in years. Upstairs, Angus feeds Crusoe tinned fish in the bathroom. Kirsty interrupts, urging him to come see what's happening downstairs. As they leave, a makeshift sign Angus placed prevents the door from closing. In a scramble for food, Crusoe slips out of the bathtub and escapes into the house. Down in the kitchen, soldiers and staff dance together as the celebration continues. But Churchill senses something strange and darts off in pursuit of an unfamiliar scent. Moments later, Angus realizes the dog is missing. Upstairs, Crusoe wanders the halls until he suddenly comes face to face with Churchill, now free from his leash. The dog charges after him, sending Crusoe racing through the house and leaving destruction in his wake. The chase ends in the hunting room, where Crusoe freezes in horror, surrounded by mounted trophies and the lifeless bodies of animals staring back at him from every wall. Angus and Kirsty follow the sounds of crashing and destruction echoing through the house during the military dinner. Captain Hamilton and also hear the chaos spreading from room to room. The chase finally bursts into the decorated banquet hall, where Churchill charges across the dining table, scattering food and dishes everywhere. Amid the confusion, Crusoe slips away unseen. Lewis quickly apologizes to and the officers, claiming he was only trying to restrain the dog. Captain Hamilton is clearly displeased, but Lewis refuses to take orders from him and instead tells him to escort Angus to his room, which Hamilton reluctantly agrees to do. Outside, Crusoe freezes, posing as a stone statue. The disguise works, fooling Churchill completely. When Crusoe later discovers a pond full of fish, he dives in and begins feeding. Lewis finds Angus searching for his friend and promises to locate the water horse if Angus returns to his room. Reluctantly, Angus agrees. At dawn, Lewis discovers Crusoe in the pond, now vastly larger than before, and brings Angus to see him. Together, Lewis and Angus transport the water horse to the loch, returning him to where he truly belongs. Back at the shed, Captain Hamilton confronts Lewis and orders him to stay away from Angus, believing Lewis to be a bad influence. Out on the loch, two fishermen accidentally hook Crusoe, only to be dragged across the water by their small boat. Fearing for their lives, they cut the line and escape. Captain Hamilton begins taking Angus under his wing, determined to turn him into a disciplined soldier. After enduring days of rigid training, Angus finally breaks free and runs back to the loch. There, he reunites with a fully grown Crusoe, who greets him joyfully. Despite his lingering fear of water, Angus climbs onto Crusoe's back and rides him across the loch. Though Crusoe dives unexpectedly at first, Angus slowly learns to enjoy the experience, overcoming his fear in the process. When they surface, Angus notices a large metal net being installed, a defensive trap meant to stop submarines from entering the loch. Later, Churchill escapes his handler and tracks Crusoe by scent. Angus convinces Crusoe to hide just as Sergeant Strunk arrives, but it's too late. Strunk sees the creature diving beneath the water. Angus tells Lewis and Kirsty everything and thanks Lewis for helping him laugh again. Captain Hamilton, overhearing, is disturbed to learn that Lewis has a flawless war record and is respected as a hero back home. In a pub, the fishermen excitedly tell locals about the massive creature they saw, and people speculate that such a sighting could attract tourists. The following day, the fishermen return with a camera, hoping to photograph the beast and make their fortune. Meanwhile, Captain Hamilton brings and the children to the loch, revealing that the military is about to conduct live cannon exercises. Angus tries to warn his mother about the creature in the water, but she doesn't believe him. Even with Kirsty supporting him, the firing begins. Cannon shells slam into the loch, narrowly missing Crusoe. Angus attempts to stop the bombardment, infuriating Hamilton, who insists the boy needs discipline. The family is sent home. Believing the creature will never surface again, the fishermen stage a fake photograph of the Loch Ness Monster, the image that later becomes famous. Angus is punished, confined to his room every evening. When Sergeant Strunk sees the photo in the newspaper, he insists it matches what he saw, and Sergeant Walker eagerly vows to hunt the creature. With Lewis's help, Kirsty sneaks Angus out, and they return to the loch. Angus calls out for Crusoe, who rises from the water in rage, snapping and roaring. Traumatized by the bombardment, Crusoe nearly bites off Angus's hand before disappearing again. Churchill leads the soldiers to the loch. Armed with harpoons, they enter the water. Crusoe kills the dog and attacks the soldiers, capsizing their boat. An SOS is sent. Hamilton, believing a German attack is underway, orders and the children into the basement, then learns Angus is at the loch and rushes to stop him. At the water's edge, Crusoe violently defends himself as Angus tries to end the chaos. Angus slips, falls unconscious, and sinks beneath the surface. Crusoe dives after him, saving his life and carrying him to shore. As Lewis attempts to revive him, Hamilton orders his men to fire at anything that moves. While unconscious, Angus remembers his father's final words, urging him to be brave and strong. Angus awakens, relieved to see Crusoe calmer once more. As and Hamilton arrive, the massive creature resurfaces, proving everyone wrong. Angus insists Crusoe is peaceful, but another cannon fires. In desperation, Angus climbs onto Crusoe's back, hoping the soldiers won't shoot, and watches in horror as cannon fire rains down. Hamilton and Lewis race toward the underwater net as Angus guides Crusoe through the storm and explosions. Mistaking Crusoe's neck for a submarine periscope, the soldiers begin raising the net. At the barrier, Lewis and Hamilton beg Angus to let go. Heartbroken, Angus releases his closest friend and swims back to his family. Crusoe dives beneath the water, destroys the net, and vanishes into the loch. The next morning, Angus and watch the sunrise. Angus finally accepts that his father will never return. Together, they see Crusoe one last time as he swims freely before disappearing beneath the surface forever. Back in the present day, the old man finishes his story, explaining that people still claim to see the creature from time to time, but Angus never does again. He knows this because he is Angus. The tourists leave the pub satisfied. Outside, a worried mother searches for her son, William, along the shore. The boy notices a large, strange rock in the sand, identical to the egg Angus once found, suggesting that Crusoe has died and left behind a successor, and that the legend of the water horse is far from over. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. Your support truly motivates us. Thanks for watching.